Labour MP Rosie Duffield has spoken to the Daily Express today, saying she's been hounded and harassed within the Labour Party for her gender-critical views. Duffield has been singled out by trans activists for saying biological sex is immutable and cannot be changed. She also says Keir Starmer's leadership team left her isolated during this abuse. So, Kevin, as a Labour man, let's start with you. Has the Labour Party got a woman problem?
No.
So that's a short answer. Let's go into the detail. Why would Keir Starmer, and talking about his changing positions earlier, he initially was going to back the SNP's gender recognition bill to the hills, but when he saw it sink the SNP north of the border, he changed his mind. Then he said 99.9% of women can't have a penis, just 0.1% from the truth.
Yeah, but he did say that.
And let's face facts. Rosie Duffield's testimony of how she's been treated is a stain on the Labour Party.
Well, he didn't say that, quote you attributed to him, if you watch the clips back in full. However, what is sad is that a Labour MP feels the way that Rosie does. I actually have a very high regard for her record in public life. She won a seat in Kent when it was a very difficult time to do so. I think she's been a champion for women on domestic abuse, and a lot of Labour MPs that I know think that she's a really good Member of Parliament. There is definitely work to be done by the Labour Party leadership in trying to improve, it looks like, the relationship with Rosie Duffield, who I think is a decent person who says things that a lot of people agree with.
Do you think this issue is going to haunt Starmer during the general election, or do people not really care? Is this like a media thing that people get really het up about, quite justifiably so, amongst women who feel that their safety is being endangered in places like swimming pools, in prisons, and on hospital wards, in rape crisis centres? Why do trans women deserve the right to access to those spaces?
Well, the whole debate, I mean, I think what the public want is just they want to see their politicians talking clearly and being able to go down the pub or the cafe and just give clear answers to clear questions.
Keir Starmer can't say what a woman is, and he's not talking clearly.
Well, it's very clear, you know, this 99.9% is not actually what he said. There are people who feel very strongly on this issue, but Labour's got some work to do with the relationship with Rosie Duffield, for sure.
Ella, what's your take on this? Do you think the Labour Party's got a woman problem?
Well, I mean, I know one quote that Keir Starmer did say when he was asked, is it right that only women have a cervix or something? He said, no, that's not right. You know, he's and the thing is,
every woman have a cervix, though? Every woman have a cervix. He
wasn't talking about biological women who might have differences in their anatomy. He was talking about including trans women in the category of women. Now, let's be real here. That's the issue, that the Labour Party is still adamant in the fact... We're not talking about, the fact that lots of women don't have children, so they're not mothers, or all the kind of various types of women that there are. We're talking about including trans women in the category of women. And the Labour Party believes that you should call trans women women. And that's the debate that we're having here, and that's the thing that Rosie Duffield says is wrong, and that's the thing that most people in the country agree with, which is that being a trans woman is markedly different from being a woman. And to my mind, there's absolutely nothing wrong or bigoted about saying that. I think the problem with the Labour Party, and the reason why this isn't just a media storm, the reason why it is important, is because it's not just about talking clearly, but it's about whether or not you are able to tell the truth, and whether or not you are able to back up things that are important to the way in which we relate to each other in society, understanding there are differences between men and women. I tell you, there's nothing that makes you realise the differences between men and women more than when you have a kid, as Rosie Duffield says, as I've just done, and suddenly you think, what is it about this whole debate that people don't get? There are still ways in which women, because we are women, are held back in society, from abortion rights to crisis in childcare, or I can give you a whole list of things. Yeah. And if the Labour Party, and many Conservatives, by the way, because let's not forget that the Conservatives are the ones that brought us into this whole mess with the question of self-ID originally.
Yeah, that's true.
But many politicians seem to be unwilling to get behind women like Rosie Duffield and say, actually, being a woman yourself, you might have an idea about this. And instead, we kind of gaslight her and say that the problem was with her.
You're absolutely correct. It's worth pointing out Maria Miller, of course, when she was the chair of the Women Equalities Committee, she had these kind of views, as did Penny Mordaunt. Came to haunt her.
Caroline Noakes, there's loads
came to haunt Penny during the leadership campaign. Kevin, do you think Keir's going to have to take a more fact-driven position on this and reverse ferret and distance himself away from the calamity that's engulfed the SNP over self-ID?
Well, what I like about what Keir's done is he looked at the Scotland debate and he said, which I think hopefully we could all agree on, is that politicians do need to be mindful of the British public in these debates. He was very clear about that. And, looks to me like Nicola Sturgeon and the team around her were not listening to a sort of broad swathe of the Scottish population. And I think what I like about Keir, who does know what a woman is, who's the proud father of a daughter and a son, what I like about him is he's interested in listening to people and not talking down to them. But, it's a complex debate, and I respect, I'm not not going to contradict or respond to people who know more about the subject than I do, to be honest.
Well, let's turn to you again then, Ed. Do you think we've kind of reached the Emperor's New Clothes moment, peak trans? We've seen the International Olympic Committee getting tough on trans people in women's sport. We saw, the extraordinary side of Miriam Coates, Tory MP, campaigning on this issue, joining hands, more or less, with Rosie Duffield, a kind of armistice moment. The adults are back in the room. Do you think we are seeing the end of this madness, or are we just being optimistic by saying that?
I think that there's an interesting thing going on, which is that because of the question of what happened in Scotland with the rapist who was categorised as a woman, all of this has been brought to the forefront. I think people are suddenly realising the madness of suggesting that it's A-OK to throw biological men and women into the same hospital ward or into the same prison or things like that. So I think there has been a turning point. The thing I'm concerned about is that actually this shouldn't all be about the very small instances where safety is a problem, so like in a prison or like in a rape crisis centre. There's a much bigger discussion to be had here about how we categorise each other and how we relate to one another, and about believing in the differences, sex difference, biological reality, and all of that, which is actually a different discussion from whether or not a rapist is called a he or a she. It's a much bigger, broader discussion about, the positives of what it's like to grow up as a teenager and have solidarity among your own sex. All these things that are actually... I want to start having this discussion in a positive light and say, what are the good things about saying that there are women's spaces and men's spaces? What are the positives in that? Why is that important, rather than continuously framing this in terms of fear?
I agree. I come from the old-fashioned political left, and I remember when it was the left's obligation and their moral duty to protect women. We've come a long way since then.